Okay, so you should have all gotten your warnings and,
It's in a new place.
I'm sorry?
It's in a new place.
Well, that's the wisdom of Zoom. What can I tell you?
Yeah, did anybody else have to download a new Zoom application?
Not,
I think I did today. I
Yeah.
do, they upgrade a lot though.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
all right, so I'd like to call the Franklin Township Historical Commission and Historical Architectural Review Board combined Zoom meeting to order on February 6th at 7, I'll call it 09. Our first order of business is the election of officers. So for this, we got to remember who's on what board when we vote. So Chuck, I, and Kathy and Lou are HARB, I believe. Kathy, you were not appointed to the Historical Commission, just the HARB or both?
Just the HARB.
Just the HARB, okay,
Mhm.
right. And then all the rest of us are Historical Commission, except Kathy. Let me, yeah. To admit someone, so I'm gonna use. That's it. I'll let Beth get in because Beth, can you hear me? Doesn't look like she's. Yeah, I know. Beth, can you hear me? No, it's okay. All right, well, we'll proceed with the nomination and election of chairman for the Historical Commission. What just popped up? Hold
It's
on.
okay. Stay there, Paul. It's all right. She said she could hear us. So it looks like Beth is
Hear
on
us?
mute, but that she can hear us.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I missed that. It flew up and I'm
No
not.
problem.
It's up on the screen there.
Yeah, I
Thank
can
you,
tell. Yeah,
Kathy.
you got it. No problem.
I can go back and bring it up, but I'd like to open the floor for nominations for chairman of the Historical Commission.
I nominate Paul Legassi.
I second it.
Do I hear any other nominations? There being no other nominations, I close the nominations. Can I have a vote on Paul Legassi as chairman of the Historical Commission? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, I'll make it unanimous.
Yep, Beth said aye too in her.
Let's see. So that was Lou, second. Chuck, I think.
Yes.
All right, I need to open the floor now for nominations for vice chairman of the Historical Commission. I would like to nominate Nan Latimer. She's not here, but she's previously served as vice chair. So I think it's fair to renominate her.
I second.
Second.
All right, I'll give that to Chuck. You're both pretty quick. Have any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll close the nominations. All in favor of Ms. Latimer as vice chair of the Historical Commission, please signify by saying aye.
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 And Beth says aye in her comment.
Yeah.
Yes, I see you trying to read it.
I know. It's
I got
windy.
you, Paul. Don't worry. I got you,
Thank
Beth.
you. All right, and then we have the nominations for Secretary of the Historical Commission. Sarah Beth, can I get you to at least nominally hold the position again?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
I'll second.
It's good to have a third officer in case both Dan and I fall off the edge of the earth. All right, so I'll take that as a nomination on my part, and with a second by Lou. And do I hear any other nominations? There being none, I'll close the nominations. All in favor of Sarah Beth Kohat as Secretary, sorry, my computer did something, that's why I'm distracted, of the Historical Commission, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Beth said aye too.
All opposed say nay. I think that was unanimous. All right, on to the HARB. I would like to open the floor for nominations for the chairman of the HARB.
I nominate Paul Legacy.
I second.
Are there any other nominations for chairman of the HARB? There being none, all in favor of Paul Legacy as chairman of the HARB, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Beth says
I
aye.
see that. Yes. Okay, I'd like to open the nominations for vice chairman. Lou, can I impose on you again?
Am I vice chairman?
You're currently vice chairman.
Okay.
I
Chairman,
second.
vice.
Okay, so it's Lou and that's PL and Kathy. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I close the nominations, and all in favor of Mr. Mandich as vice chairman of the HARB, signify by saying aye. Aye. It's
Aye.
unanimous. And finally, Kathy, you interested in serving as secretary?
I
It's a-
can't. But it's yeah, with my schedule. I want to be involved in the America 250 stuff, so I'm gonna pull some my weight here over the
Okay.
next 2 years. So
Right.
yeah,
All right.
someday.
I know
Just-
Chuck won't do it. And Beth, I think it's a little early to ask you to do it. We've been leaving it empty and I've been serving as de facto secretary. And so we'll just go with that for the time being. Okay, so that closes the election of officers for this year. Being that there are no members of the public logged in, there's no public comment. The next item on the agenda concerns the draft minutes, which from the December 5th meeting. These need obviously approval, but before we vote on approval, I'd just like to open the discussion and see if anybody has any comments or corrections or other changes that they'd like to see to the minutes. Not hearing any.
No,
I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of December 5th as presented.
they look good to me.
Yeah.
I'll recommend it.
Okay. I have a motion from Mr. Mandich to approve. Do I have a second?
I am always there for a second.
Glad to know that. All right, so we have a second from Mr. Phillips. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. I think we're unanimous. I can't tell if Beth is abstaining or not.
I think she said, well, we haven't gotten anything from her since
Yeah, that's what
7:15.
I know. That's what it's unnecessary. I'll
Are
just.
they joint? It's a joint.
Abstaining? Okay. Yeah, abstains. Okay, so the next item on the agenda concerns the ever ongoing and never acted upon updating of historic resource surveys and PHMC data from the map. This is something that we have to do. This is something I probably have to get my act together and do, but it's not a high priority right now, so there's nothing to report on this topic. At some point, this will get done. As for the Churchill African Cemetery, sorry. We do want to do a cleanup. I haven't spoken to Crystal Crampton, who is our contact with the UAME Church, who are the property owners. And so, and she hasn't called me. So we're both kind of like letting the ball drop there. But I would like to see if we can't do something in March. And so I will be getting in touch with her and I will let everyone know what's up with that. So I'm making a note now. Also, Sally, you said you had been out to the cemetery and it looked as bad as ever.
Yeah, worse. I just stopped by there today, and there's a lot of big trees down, which I didn't remember from before.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably at least 4 of them, good sized trees, just right down in the middle of all the mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't see any of the headstones. They just must be all covered up with, vegetation. I didn't spend a lot of time out there, but it's it's a mess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know there were some trees that were in the process of falling down. They may have, completed their journey. Were there some still sort of suspended on other trees as well?
I didn't take notice.
Okay.
But
So maybe that's where
the trees that are down, that they're pretty big.
right.
So
Well, I knew there was one pretty big fat one and even sort of semi-decayed that was lying across the middle of the cemetery that I distinctly remember, but it's been a little while since I've been up there too.
yeah. So that's about all I had to report on it,
Okay.
I wonder if people in the township would be interested in the firewood from the fallen trees, and you might get people to come cut the trees and take the firewood. How you get the word out, I don't know. And if there's any weird legal liability in letting them do that, because otherwise, if you get a tree person to do it, it's going to be prohibitively expensive. So
I
don't
think
know.
that that's something to talk over with Crystal, because any
Okay.
permissions would have to involve
Okay.
the church. And it's something that if we were to try and get the word out, I'd probably work with Jeff to see what he
I
thought
was
about
thinking of
that.
something like
You
that.
might want to work with Paul Overton.
Yeah, that too. It's not a very big plot, which is part of the problem. And
Yeah,
the road is,
I know that I was on a little crew with Paul just down the street where he had a whole bunch of people. Cutting
yeah,
down
I've done,
trees.
right. No, I've done work with him before too, some years ago. The sort of sunken road that's now a trail off of Auburn or something, or near Auburn.
Mhm.
But this is yeah, have to look at it and see, but yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring Paul on, to talk to him about it, but, kind of have to start with, we may have to make it safe to walk there before we talk about trying to maneuver and cut up trees. And, ideally, it would be a good thing if we could get the neighboring property owner to allow us to bring perhaps a truck up their driveway, because their driveway runs right behind the cemetery. But I'm not sure what can be arranged. So, once we get going with Crystal, we'll at least have some more of a game plan and we can see what we can manage. But yeah, those are both good ideas. Although I think some of the wood is so bad, it's not usable as firewood. Some of the large logs that I remember being down on the ground were already kind of punky, so I can't imagine that they've gotten any better.
No.
But yeah, so March would be ideal. We keep missing deadlines on this, but part of the problem has been getting organized with the church, and Crystal spent years working on Bucktoe cemeteries, so I think Crystal takes a very long view, and if things aren't working out, she figures, well, we know where the cemetery is and we'll get to it at some point. So it's not something I'm trying to get the township to take lead on anymore, now that we've got the church linked up with its own property. And so I'm basically going to follow Crystal's lead on this. Other cemeteries. I had a conversation when well, not really a conversation, an email exchange, when the situation with the Big Elk State Park was kind of going full blast before the meeting at the elementary school. Chuck McGaw got in touch with me. This is Chuck McGaw, the son, not the father. And so he is the trustee for the Mount Olivet property. And he is talking about trying to do a cleanup in the spring, perhaps. That property is not in nearly as bad shape as is the Churchill property. So I sent him some information and said we'd be happy to work with him. I haven't heard anything from him since, but I'll get back in touch with him and see if he's planning to move forward on that, and to let us know if he's looking for volunteers, because we can certainly put the word out. I suspect that's going to be far easier and will not involve chainsaws, but rakes and pruners and little light work. The last time I was there, it didn't seem too bad. It's more of a cleanup than a kind of recapturing it from the forest. Does anybody else have anything to add about any of the other cemeteries? I know we now have someone mowing Flint Hill, which is good. Concerning the Mason-Dixon and Art Corner connectivity project, I missed the last meeting. So at the moment, I don't have a lot to tell anyone, because I have to sit down and listen to a 2-hour recording of the meeting to understand exactly what did happen. But what they had been doing was collecting information on historical sites in the various townships. For those of you who aren't terribly familiar with this project, this involves 4 townships. It's Elk, New Garden, Franklin, and London, Britain. And the project is managed by the Brandywine Conservancy. It's done under a Chester County Vision Partnership Grant. And basically, it's ultimately going to prepare sort of an overview of a plan for connecting local trails in the various townships in a way that brings hikers to historical resources. So an important partner in this is going to be the state, because both in the preserve, the White Clay Creek Preserve, and in the Big Elk State Park, you have a number of boundary markers, which are very important to the Mason-Dixon and the Art Corner story. And the Peter Benton, who is with Heritage Solutions, has been talking to Rob Campion and perhaps others in DCNR about this, because at some point we will be talking to the state. But for the moment, they're identifying themes for the that could be explored by historical trail or trails with historical content. So while there are already some trails in parks that will lead you to, say, the Art Corner Monument and the Tri-State Marker, which could be linked up and are to some degree linked up to various trails in London, Britain. There are no current trails that will actually take you to any of the three Mason-Dixon milestone markers that are found in the Big Elk Creek State Park. You can use a trail to get sort of close to one, and then you have to strike out across a field. And in the other two cases, you have to strike out across the field. There's no way to walk there directly. So if we're going to get people out to any of those, and you wouldn't necessarily need to get them out to more than one, I suppose, you would need better trail access, because right now you're just tromping through grass that in the summer is easily, a foot high, and you need to know where you're going. As I discovered when I was working on the identification of historic resources. So for the moment, that's all I can tell you about it, because I haven't had a chance since I came back from Costa Rica to sit down and go through 2 hours of the video. But I will be attending the next one, and I will take a look at this one. And if there's anything important in there, I'll send it out to everybody. So, Sarah Beth, you're usually our best piece of information on the 896 road work. Do you have any? I guess we got somebody.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
The only thing I know is my husband was looking online and he said there's a website where you can check the status of when the project goes out to bid. And
Right.
from that information, it looks like they are about 6 months behind in the bidding process, which I think was supposed to happen by the end of last year. So that's all I know.
What's the website, Sarah Beth?
Is that Project Path?
Oh.
Sarah?
It might be. I tried to find it and I couldn't find it.
I think it's
have a chance
Project
to ask my
Path.
husband.
So yeah, I would check PA Project Path, and you want to look for, I think it's called the 896 SIP project. SIP stands for Safety Improvement Project. Sarah Beth, are you still negotiating with them, or did you get a solution that you were happy with?
There's been no change in our situation since our last meeting.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chuck, there's really been no significant progress on any sort of walkability at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel to move it forward, we need to start planning it. Stop kicking it down the road is my feeling. Nobody has to commit to anything actually being a road, but I mean, I'm sorry, a path. But at least my feeling is every time something comes up, we should be identifying where pedestrian access would be on that project, be it a road project or a development project, etc. With that in mind, I mean, maybe Campbellsville would move forward with that too. Just
Yeah.
not actually, I know it's going to be difficult to put the money out there, but if you don't plan for it, it's never going to happen. I mean, the more we remove ourselves from the concept that we could walk, the harder it's going to get. I mean, that's my opinion. That's what I'm going to push for.
Right. I think your remarks were in that vein at the last PC meeting,
Yep.
planning commission meeting where this was discussed.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I mean, if we have to stop, we have to start trying to figure out a way of at least thinking about how we might make it work and not worrying about whether the situation is perfect or not. That
Yeah.
seems to hang us up.
It seems like every time something's suggested, then somebody throws a hurdle in front of it, and then it just kind of goes away. What if we don't do the end solution now, and we simply do the planning?
Right.
They just did a road project where they removed banks on both sides of the road, but not beyond where the cars were going to travel. Why wouldn't you just remove an extra 4 feet at that point? You already have, the work's already being done. Is my point. We just keep making the hurdle higher and higher and higher by ignoring it. So I would say Campbellsville should be investigated from that standpoint, but I don't know what the mechanism would be.
Yeah, it's certainly a little trickier in Campbellsville in the sense that we don't control the roads. The state does. So anything that we get done, we have to get done in conjunction with the state. So.
Sure, but the state, yeah, but because the state isn't likely to do it, why can't we have a plan
Right.
that says we would like this? At this point, we don't even have a plan that says we would like this. So that ends up being the same thing where people go, oh, no, the state won't do that. It's like, yeah, but at least we could have a plan that says this is what we would like. And then we'll find out what this, we're already too late on 896, but why wait?
No, I'm not disagreeing with you.
I know.
I'm just saying there's an extra layer of complication, but I think to that point, I believe in an earlier meeting, you brought up the point that if we have a plan that we can point to when the state proposes doing something, then we have a good reason to go to the state and say, how can you accommodate this? What can you do to help us reach our goal on this?
Yeah.
And we just, right now, we don't have anything that we can really point to. And that's the big problem.
I was just in Philly for the first time in years and years and years. Philadelphia now has bike paths on their roads. We're so far behind on this. I don't know why we're dragging our feet. I mean, if Philadelphia is already ahead of us on addressing this, we're way behind.
Even Lancaster City just redid some of their roads that bike paths and rearranged the parking.
Yeah. And Newark is doing it too.
Yeah. Everybody's doing it, and we're acting like it's not a thing. Super frustrating, but I think what we propose is to simply start to plan, and I don't know how. I would hope that would knock down some of the opposition, because I believe there's some substantial opposition.
To any kind of walking access?
Yep.
Yeah.
From the property owners, or you don't
I
need to
think-
name names. I was just
No. I think, yeah, and I'm just having it's just philosophical, but I think if you don't want to use it, then you find it to be an annoyance. And if you're currently simply a driver, then the thought of people being around the road is a little bit frightening, especially as people get older. That they don't want that extra dimension to our roads, which is unfortunate, because I think it flies in the face of all of our healths. So, but I think there is opposition for that reason. I don't know how to pin it better than that. I don't know. Do you think we would be struggling this much if there wasn't opposition?
I don't know if it's opposition or just, I think part of the problem, is people, I think there is some opposition to trails. But generally, I don't know if that's along roads, but where it might be through areas of border on various properties, but don't necessarily parallel roads. And I think that there is a sort of mindset that, you and I have seen, where the ordinance speaks too much of sidewalks and not enough of pedestrian access.
Mhm.
And everybody goes, no, we're rural, we don't want sidewalks. And I don't know, I think that there are other alternatives to sidewalks. Newcastle County has a fairly extensive system of what I would call asphalt trails, which are in some ways less visually impactful than sidewalks. And they're easier to route than sidewalks. But they're mostly routed, not entirely, but they're mostly either routed along roads or through county land. So the question of, interior trails that involve, a sort of closeness to, say, people's backyards really isn't an issue. I know there was some opposition at one point from a few neighbors who were concerned about the effects of the trail around the Ford farm because it was going to run along people's backyards. And there was concern about what, you know, what that would do to their privacy and maybe creating access to the rear of the house instead of, and whether that would affect their safety. I don't think that there's been any evidence of anything like
Yeah, I
that
think
in
that
the
if
years
you,
that the trail's been there.
I
And in
think
fact,
there's a distinct difference on if it's behind the property, I think that's a different set of people
yeah,
that object to it. I think there is there possibly is a larger number of people who are object to trails behind their home than people that would object to trails in front of their home.
Hmm.
I think there's also a fear. Yeah, well, while we're talking about homeowners, it's normally done in urban areas where you get a sidewalk and now you're responsible for the
Right.
sidewalk, which is, I mean, that's difficult to swallow, actually. And that's why I would prefer to see it. And I find if it's behind properties, that's a little more leisurely and that doesn't really give you pedestrian access.
Mhm.
I mean, I want to walk over and pick up eggs from my egg distribution place, right? You know,
Mhm.
it's a half mile away or maybe a quarter of a mile, somewhere between the two. And right now I'm walking on borrowed land because I walk on two of my neighbors' front yards that they have large front yards. They don't care. And then ultimately I end up on the farm and he's doing the eggs, but I really shouldn't have to, but I do. You know, I just do. I just can't physically walk. There's no side, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing along the road. So um, I think we need to get back to that in the front. And I think I think the opposition is mostly never having seen it, maybe. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. All I remember is, you know, in the height of COVID, seeing all these people walking the Ford Farm trails, which I'd never seen, seeing whole families out there.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really great, you know, and my yard, you know, it's perimetered by the trail. So,
Yeah.
But I just thought that was really nice. And I'll be working in my vegetable garden and people go by and, you know, occasionally it's a hi, occasionally it's a 3 or 4 sentence conversation, which is even nicer.
Yeah.
But you know, different people like different things. Some people value their privacy more. But anyway, no, I agree with you. I just think this is something we just have to find a way of making it a goal that we're always trying for, even if we aren't necessarily succeeding every time.
It is, you prompted a thought for me, Chuck.
Yeah.
We are the we're the historical people. So what you just said, people don't know, they're fearful of it because they don't know what it looks like. There's a lot of people in this area that have lived here for a long time and probably remember walking places back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even, I dare say 70s. Maybe it would be helpful to tap into people who recall walking as young children if they're in their 70s, 80s. I don't know. I saw a picture today of a Kemblesville school group from the 30s or something on Facebook. It was really cool. And there were a bunch of people who jumped on there saying, you know, they knew they're their parents, or, you know, there were it was a big group of people who responded to that photo. And then hearing you say, well, they don't know what it looks like. Well, I think there's probably a group of people here who do remember what it is
Yeah.
to walk around this area, and might be helpful to ask them to, you know, recall those times when they walked in the past to make that feel more alive, more doable.
Yeah.
Just an idea. I also support, you know, I've listened to this trails talk forever, and, you know, I think if we don't have a plan, if there isn't something in writing, it's never going to get any traction ever.
Yeah.
So it has to be on paper somewhere, or it's never gonna get traction. That's why it hasn't gotten traction, I think.
And I
Despite
guess
all
that,
of, yeah.
go ahead. Well, that's
No,
what I'm
that,
saying. There's opposition because there actually was opposition to the idea that we would put a map out there that would show trails.
well, yeah, I mean, I was part of that with the comprehensive, the
Yeah.
plan that we put together. That was a very collegial process until we got to the map part, and there was tremendous opposition to that. So that's one attempt to get the plan. I think that's too soft. I don't know. It seems like there should be communities right in Chester County that have already tackled this. I go back to Marshallton, where they have those brick sidewalks there that I recall a whole section of that being put in the late 90s,
Mhm.
that did not exist previously. So there are communities in Chester County that have already tackled this, and maybe we should be canvassing them to see what process they follow to get this done. And that those sidewalks in Marshallton are along, what is that, Stroudsburg Road, or
Strasburg Road, yeah.
yeah, pretty like similar, I would think, to 896 at least. Pretty fast
Well,
moving.
Unionville got some kind of a grant to do it too, to connect their sidewalks, because the one section down the hill, you could walk on the south side on a oyster shell path,
Right.
but
Yeah.
not on the other side. So they got some kind of a grant through Dinnaman, I think, and maybe somebody else to make brick sidewalks. And they even built retaining walls. So I'll try and follow up with that. That was maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that too. That wasn't that long ago.
No,
That's directly applicable to Campbellsville.
it is. It's a state road, sidewalk, the whole deal.
Yep. So maybe tapping into the oral history of residents, here who remember what it was to walk around.
I do. When I only moved out here in 87, but for a few years, I was pretty comfortable walking up to what was then Landhope Farms in the middle of the
Mhm.
village to get a
Yep.
newspaper in the morning and walking back. And at some point, it was just a little too exciting that early in the morning. And some of that may actually be improved some when they have a three-way stop in
Yep.
the middle of the village.
Mhm.
But so I think that may actually help Appleton. Part of the problem with Appleton is, you really need to walk facing traffic, and if you're walking into the village, the edge of the road in certain locations is dangerous. It's dangerous to step off the road onto the edge of the road. There's spots where it's
Yeah.
really rough, as you know.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, coming back, there's an embankment, although I've always felt like I could lean into the embankment if I had to. But it's not the same thing as being in danger of dropping down into a hole if you're not careful. If you're walking at night, I walked up to the meeting at on the Big Elk in the charter school, and because it was close and I knew there was going to be a lot of cars up there, and I figured I could, my wife didn't want me to do it, so. But it was fine. It was a little busy. It was fine, but I've kind of walked out before. I know what the problems are, and it's not that long. And once you get to the middle of the village, it's okay. You've got, you don't have things quite as broken up, so you can step off the road and not worry about where you have to step. But yeah, I think the point about walking stories is not a bad one. I'm not sure how we get that sort of oral history started, but there might be a way.
I mean, Facebook seems like the perfect, blower for that kind of news. I think you put a question out from the township on there, and I bet you
Yeah.
would get a lot of people, good and bad. But, to Chuck's point of they're fearful until they know what it looks like. Might be
Right.
helpful to have people recall it.
Yeah.
It's a neat idea.
Yeah, as long as we're not, if we're not in a rush to get somewhere, then maybe there's less worry about having people on the edge of the road.
So I didn't stay at the meeting. Can you give a little synopsis of what happened at the meeting? My wife was feeling ill.
So I got, shall we say, locked out of the meeting.
Oh,
When I got up there, uh, I sort of volunteered to pitch in and help hand out informational things and get people to sign up sheets and things like that. And so by the time I turned around for the meeting,
there's no
um,
seats.
it was worse than that. You couldn't get close enough to the doorway to hear it, because I think the email that Jeff sent out said there was something like 400 people in the room and 250 people online. So it was my goal. There is a video you can watch. You can find the link on the township website.
Okay, all right.
And that's what I need to do. But it's just, that's about 2.5 hours, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the Zoom thing.
Yeah. I
didn't
mean,
know
my
they even had
understanding
that.
was
Hmm.
for the moment anyway, the campground is off the table.
Seems so.
Yeah. Where we go from here, I don't know. I mean, I think everybody would like to see the campground just be never back on the table again, and I don't think anybody got any guarantees to that effect.
One thing they agreed that night was to develop the working group with other residents.
Like
Right.
a task force.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I heard, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I heard a little bit about that today at the London Britain Historical Commission meeting earlier, because I attend that in the morning. And Eileen Parrish, who's a supervisor there, said that they were in the process of finalizing the membership for that working group. So
well, good.
the fellow who was sitting next to Christy Dunn and Scotty Crowder, who heads up the Friends of White Clay Creek Preserve, are going to be co-chairs. And then they're supposed to get like a supervisor and one other person from the townships. And I don't know too much beyond that. She didn't say a lot. So I don't know how many people are going to be involved beyond that. On the other hand, if it's a working group and they're holding public meetings, that's almost as good as having everyone on board, because at least people can know what's going on and can react in if not real time, then very close to it. And let their local government officials and their state government officials know that they're unhappy, because that seems to have worked fairly well this time
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. I got the impression that night that everybody that was up front, that each one of those people was going to be able to appoint someone.
Okay.
But, I don't know if that's still the case. So, yeah, the supervisors from Elk were going to be able to have, I guess, 2 people. The same with Franklin and
Right.
everybody else that was up there. But I don't know if that's what's really happening. But that's how they spelled it out that night.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, Paul, what I found sort of puzzling about the whole situation was there was talk, I think Representative Lawrence said something about it, and then Jeff Eastburn sent around a letter from the Strawbridge family that basically said when they gave that land, they intended it to basically stay as a preserve. And so I have no idea what the documents say or, you know, the program that it was given under, but if
Right.
that was clearly expressed in all those documents, I don't know why this discussion was even being had about, you know, even minimal development of the property for camping or other purposes. But
Right.
it's a little puzzling because it makes me wonder, you know, if somebody were to want to donate a historic property and have it preserved as a historic property or for a museum or whatever, like that intent, if it's clearly expressed, should be respected.
So,
So
um, so Strawbridge, you know, did sell it. He didn't give it. And it's my understanding that there were no hard and fast conditions placed on the sale that would prevent the state from doing what it wanted to do.
okay.
It was acquired, when it was acquired, it was incorporated as an extension of the White Clay Creek Preserve, which is the nearest state park land.
Right.
And so but I don't know that it was ever formally, I don't know whether, you know, the declaration was not, you know, that creation, that making it part of it was not something that was done in perpetuity.
Okay.
It's also important to know that under current state law, and this I learned from sitting in on the London Britain Historical Commission stuff, because they interact with the Friends of White Clay Creek and DCNR a lot because they have historic properties that are actually enclosed buildings on DCNR land. The definition of a preserve under state law is nothing. There is no definition. So
Wow.
I think part of what John Lawrence was proposing was in fact to define a preserve and then to make this the second preserve. But that may be a bit, you know, getting that definition in, you're going to also then have to deal with people in London, Britain, who are going to want to know exactly how their preserve is going to be legally defined, because you're now going to set absolute conditions, and they have trails, like biking on trails over there is an issue. There wasn't
Sure.
really supposed to be extensive biking in the preserve originally, but there is more biking now. So
And
that's,
horses.
yeah. And so various things have become issues. And I think in the process of getting to a definition of preserve, there would be a lot of negotiation on the part of various interest groups, because once you create a definition, then you're going to be able to apply that almost anywhere in the state. And when that was set up as a preserve, there was no state law that specified what a preserve was, and there still is not.
That's
So
interesting.
it's a sort of a preserve in name only, and that really is something that ought to be resolved.
Yeah,
What
we're
does it mean?
probably lucky then that more hasn't been done to the white clay because there was nothing to prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing to real preserved lands, in my experience in the state, are the state game lands, which are simply wildlands.
Right.
Um,
And they probably
and-
don't have the historic resources that these here do.
Well, some of them actually may. There'll be ruins somewhere that nobody's ever taken the time to identify. But I know that in the Jim Thorpe area, the difference between a park and a game land is an issue, because the Glenanoco Falls are actually in a game land, and it's a popular hiking spot. And because it's in a game land, there's been no official money to develop a safe hiking trail. And every now and then people get stranded or killed or injured hiking too
Wow.
close to the falls. And the state, in order to avoid having to deal with it, has taken measures to kind of fence things off, which is not really a great solution. It's a very it's a very beautiful natural feature. But so, but yeah, I think, the game lands in many ways, to my mind, there just is no development that occurs on them that I'm aware of, or it's very minimal development. You have fire roads.
Interesting.
Yeah. Although you will have, like major electrical trunk lines running through state game lanes, which you really wouldn't want something like that down here running through the preserves.
Well, again, without a definition of a preserve,
You could, I
there's
know.
probably no way to prevent that
Well, it's just
other than active citizens.
active and unwillingness on the part of the state to agree to have its land used for that. I think in some of these cases, these things were done years ago. But from what I've seen upstate, they're pretty undeveloped. They're very wild. Let's see. I'm going to move on if that's all right with everyone. In terms of raising awareness of Kempsville and Franklin history, so I have an agreement with 1723 to host some brochures on local history, which I sort of distributed by email a little while back, and those were the ones we were handing out at the Franklin Fall Festival. So there's one on the Mason-Dixon line. There's one on Ben Franklin's relationship to Franklin Township. And there's a third one that I can't recall right now. And so I was talking with Sarah Cody this weekend. I finally got over there when she was working, and she's fine with it. So she's seen the brochures, and I'll be talking to the township to get them to purchase some sort of little brochure holder thing that we can sort of put in a location. And we'll get them there. And I'm hoping to at least have the Mason-Dixon line over at which one? The cidery, Old Stone Cider, when they reopen. I left it there one day, but Evan wasn't around, so I have to get in touch with Evan and see. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Beth, I have to squint and read this. Yeah. Land and bookstore is not a bad idea, and there are other places as well. It's the thing that actually has been, I've just been moving slowly. I've been the one going around asking around, and yeah, I'm good with that. And I'm hoping that maybe we can eventually have something on London Britain's historic district, which is related to the Welsh Baptists, and is really a very interesting story, and just make the brochures a little more regionally inclusive. And once we get them out there, it's easy to replenish them as long as somebody lets us know that we've run out of a brochure. So also under this topic is America 250, which kind of dovetails with the Mason-Dixon Art Corner Connectivity Project. And there is going to be a couple meetings. The Chester County Historic Preservation Network has a spring leadership meeting in March, and they're going to be discussing the America 250 plan. And we talked a little bit about this last time. We talked about maybe doing joint talks, doing something at the Franklin Fall Festival, and a few other things. And so after and I mentioned to London Britain this morning that just to see if they would be interested in doing something like this. So America 250 is in 2026. And I think after I get a better sense of what the Historic Preservation Network is doing. They're kind of deeply involved in that. There's a lot of leadership overlap between the Chester County Historic Preservation Network and America 250. And there's overlap with Heritage Solutions and America 250, and Heritage Solutions is involved in the Mason-Dixon program. And so they've got a draft proposal. I don't know if anybody else gets their emails, but they're having a meeting. Bear with me a second. So there's a public meeting on February 22nd. Where the Chester County's draft heritage tourism plan is going to be presented. And while this is sort of separate in a way from America 250, it ties into the America 250 plan. And that's going to be up at, I think, the county offices. I'm looking here. But they're having a public meeting, and I got basically a sort of email about it, and so you have to register for the public meeting, but it's open to anyone. Kathy, so if you're sort of interested in America 250 and you have the opportunity, you might at least think of looking at that. I don't know if you're going to be able to attend it via Zoom or not, because I haven't gotten beyond reading this Chester County Planning press release.
Yeah, and then there are virtual meetings. I wasn't able to make the one, not last Friday, but the Friday before, at noon. I think they're doing monthly virtual meetings to
Right.
talk about the various America 250 plans. I met with Mark Evans, who is a commissioner for Township, and I think on their historical commission. He was a speaker at that event. Paul, I think you might have been there in person, and I listened to it via Zoom.
He's the
back-
very energetic ex-New Yorker.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So I met him. And it's still early days, but launching off of the event that they did at that farm in Township, and with reenactors and made a destination, he is working on the longest dinner table in Chester County concept, where on a day he would have as many people sitting at a table at that farm, as another event. And I think I have him talked into doing like a mega longest dinner table in 2026. And Matt and I are very interested in using our property, which we have that 70 acres, over here on Good Hope and 896 with a really long path. So I'm going to work with Mark to see what we can do about having the longest dinner table in the summer of 2026 on our property to celebrate America 250.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so as the details start to come together, I think Mark is going to practice this summer next. So he has 2 summers, to practice this, but I'm trying to convince him to make it not limited to Cown, but make it like a county-wide idea where on one night, in the summer of 2026, people, gather at long tables throughout the county to celebrate America, Chester County. And I'm hoping that Franklin Township, if we can really pull it together, have a really great showing with a big long table going down our back pasture, which is, it's probably 20 acres back there.
Okay, well, are you going to attend any of his planning meetings for Cown to see how they work out, or?
I am, yeah. So he and I, we're meeting in a couple weeks. So we've mapped out meetings for the next like 2 years, at least monthly. And with the idea of I would go up and, for his Township dinner this summer, Matt and I would go up there and check that out, see how that all goes. So we'll see, this, it's still early days, but I love this idea. I don't know about you guys, but I was 6 when we celebrated the bicentennial, and I just remembered, all the flags, and I grew up in the Poconos, and there was a really big effort to celebrate the country. And as a child, I remember this. So I think it would be really fun to do something, big locally, especially in these times, I think, to celebrate our existence.
Mhm. Well, keep us informed.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in
Yeah,
high school. I don't remember a thing.
Well, then that meant you were having a good time.
Well,
Same
or
here.
just ignoring everything. I'm pretty sure that was like, whatever.
No, they had
Yeah, I was,
parades and all kinds of things
oh, it
here.
was huge. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember it being really big.
There
I have a
was
little,
there was a wagon train that came out 896, I think.
cool.
There are pictures of it that Alan Jones has. He's in New London. And he made an interesting point. He said back in 1976, most of the people who lived out this way still actually lived in historic homes. There were not yet too many neighborhoods out here.
That's true. There were
And
like
so when you were talking
no-
about history, people were many people were living on historic properties. They knew what history was. They were in old houses.
They were driving down dirt roads.
You could still do that in Vermont and Costa Rica.
Yes.
And parts of Chester County.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Upper Oxford.
But yeah, Brock. Yeah. So anyway, with regard to all that, just to wrap it up, I know with the fall festival coming up, my goal is to have some kind of, fleshed out idea and promote it over the next 2 fall festivals. This concept of the longest table, and see what we can do to build some local energy. The other idea that I have that we're kicking around, is trying to find funds that in the village of Kemblesville, even on the 4th in 2026, try to have as many houses fly a flag for that week, or, something distinctive.
Mhm.
So I know there's grant money and things like that available to support that kind of stuff. So I'll be learning more.
4th of July, 2026, we're going to be hosting the World Cup.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just saw that last night. Tremendous 6 games here in Philadelphia, right?
And one of them lands right on the 4th.
Awesome, right? How freaking awesome. Wonderful.
It sounds like between Philadelphia celebrations of the 4th and a World Cup game, it sounds like a massive traffic jam to me.
Yeah, it does.
But I'm
never
sure it'll
been
be a
to-
lot of fun. I was in New York, going back and forth weekly to work, when it was the 100th anniversary celebration of the Brooklyn Bridge, and went down to Battery Park, thereabouts, and watched the fireworks, and they were just really incredible. They had fireworks coming off the bridge towers and dripping down from the bottom edge of the bridge. I assume they did no damage to the bridge, but it was a sight to see. It was really incredible.
Cool.
Yeah, my wife went for the Statue of Liberty one, and she said they launched so many fireworks you couldn't see the Statue of Liberty through the smoke.
Well, I'm looking up the year. So my grandfather, we walked over the George Washington Bridge on one of its anniversaries. There were hundreds of
nice.
people. Yeah, which was very cool.
That is the
those things-
largest, that has the most traffic of any bridge in the entire world. I can't
Wow.
believe it.
I feel like I get caught in it every
No.
time, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I've definitely been in the traffic.
Well, but when you're sitting in the traffic, you go, oh yeah, this is the largest amount of traffic in the world as you're sitting there, for sure.
Yes.
Take the lower level.
Oh, it's scary. Yeah.
You take the lower, well,
Oh, the
you
lower
take the
level
lower
is
level because the trucks have to go on the top level.
the trucks have to go on the top level, and as a rule, the access tends to get less jammed up to the lower level. As a rule, not always. Anyway, I can move on to the
But
next.
anything I find out, I'm happy to bring it forward for.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Yep.
Because
You're gonna
at
have
some point, we're gonna
a
have to
World Cup
talk.
watch party during this. You're gonna have you're gonna have a big screen TV to fill all those seats.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Yep. Why not?
I'll be there.
I could just see it in my, I don't know, I follow this group called Outstanding in the Field, and they put on very large dinners in all these great places all over the world. They're on Facebook. I recommend you check them out. Just the pictures alone are stunning. And I can just see the tables clear in my mind. We have great parking, and, just put that table way out there. And just know that other places in the county would do the same thing on kind of the same weekend or something. I just think that'd be a great sense of community.
That's sort of it's interesting. You got me thinking that we went to New York for when Christo did the gates in Central Park. And I lived in New York for a while and spent a fair amount of time in Central Park. And that was, in its own interesting way, very transformative, much more so than you would have thought, for just hanging a bunch of orange, I don't know what you would call them, downward facing flags, bunting, except it was
Yep,
not.
I know. Yep, I saw them. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
beautiful.
and it makes me wonder that, you know, maybe we could even for one fall festival do something where we have a little walk through our park, where we have little historical bits of information
I think
tallied
that's right.
towards the various years, so that each site has something where you stop and you read about it, or maybe we can, get with a given year, we can have a certain historical flag, like the Chester County Militia flag, and then the Betsy Ross flag, as it's called, and later flags. With you can buy these things online; they're not very expensive, for about
It's a great idea,
$15.
Paul.
You know,
Beautiful. The other thing I'll share is right before Saturday before Christmas, and I brought 3 friends as a gift to 2 of my girlfriends. I took their 9, 10, and 11-year-old children out for the day, the Saturday before Christmas, so that they wouldn't tear the house apart. And my friends could get last minute, wrapping done and stuff. I took them on the holiday historical tour in Westchester. It was a walking tour, about a mile and a half, with 2 reenactors to talk about the history of Christmas in Westchester Borough. So, I could share more information about that, Paul, but something like that at the fall festival with even the flags, or, some kind of historical stops, I think that's a great opportunity to showcase, our rich history here. It was really well attended and extremely well done, and we're going to make it tradition. Those kids, or they would love to go again and again. We all had a great time.
it's nice. I dropped my pen caps and
Uh-oh.
no, that's okay. I'll figure it out later. So there's nothing more at the moment to say about the website. It's in a kind of hold. And there's not a lot to say about township history, except that I am continuing to work with Tim Barnikov, although it's not going to affect our township too much, since he's decided to focus on the White Clay Creek only within the preserved lands, as I like to call them. So that means the White Clay Creek Preserve and the White Clay Creek State Park. But he will be doing a sort of Mason-Dixon Art Corner chapter. And so at some point there will be, there will be more about that. And eventually he will have a book, which will probably be, from what I've seen, a very interesting local history book on the lands in the White Clay Creek State Park. As for multi-municipal identification of historic resources in the Big Elk Creek State Park, which is a nice mouthful, the draft version of that is done, which is to say, we did get together an identification of all the known sites, and I think I sent it out something out to everybody. Um, and I'm going to be going out at some point and trying to do some refinement work on sites where we have more than one building and the buildings are spread out. I will probably try and see if I can't locate all the buildings with GPS coordinates. So, when I do that, everybody will be invited if they want to go trekking. It will probably be toward the end of February, I'm thinking, because it has to be done while the leaves are off the trees. You can't see anything once things start to green up. But, it was, the hard work is over and that's good. And it's a useful document. I'm not going to post it because it's basically a guideline to every historic site in the park. So if anybody's looking to try and do some bottle digging and that sort of stuff and freelance archaeology, it's unfortunately a guide to doing that. So with the township, you all should have a copy, and if you don't and would like one, I'll get it to you. And then the township has a copy, Elk has a copy, DCNR has a copy, and the people who are working on the park plan have a copy. And one of the really interesting things about that, as I was working on it, is one of what I think is the best ruins in the park, which is a beautiful barn foundation, extremely well preserved, and not terribly overgrown. So you can really take in its sense of scale. Would have backed up almost right against the campground, which is not ideal. So, anyway, the state now knows where most of these things are, and with a luck, it will not be a guide to bulldozing anything. Yeah, well, once you decide something is a hazard, then they feel like they've got to take action. And this is potentially a problem. They have to, they do have to learn to treat them as historic resources and not as attractive nuisances that they need to take care of them. I'm sorry, Chuck?
Liabilities.
Yeah, liabilities. I mean, I can understand if you felt the need to fill a well, but if you're going to do that, do it by filling the well and leaving the top rim of the well visible so that you can still sort of figure out where it was. Don't just take something and push the well in on itself. Because a number of these sites have wells, and it is important to know they're there. They are hazards. Some of them, luckily, are not in places where people are going to go wandering, but some of them are. So.
I watch a show called Time Turners in England. Is there anything in the US like that?
You have to tell me what that is.
They're an archaeology group that does what they do is they go in for 3 days to a site and they do archaeology on that site for 3 days and they try to discover exactly what it is. But they're brought to locations by local people. And it's a TV show, but I mean, I wonder if there's anything in the US that's similar to that where you could, group of archaeologists that you would call and say, we have a really interesting site.
Right.
I mean, obviously we'd have to have permission from the state, but why would the state balk at that? I just wonder if anybody ran across a group like that before.
The closest thing I know to that basically are the archaeologists kind of get hired for Section 106 things, and they're being paid by, the people, like they're being paid by PennDOT when they want to widen 896. And so and when they were doing the pipeline work, the pipeline people had to hire archaeologists, and they did test holes. And if they found a significant test hole, they would do more expanded work. But you're talking about something different, which makes me wonder, how do they get paid?
Oh, they're a TV
The
show.
TV show, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I mean, what if it's just what if they're archaeologists that just want to do archaeology on the weekend as a hobby?
Or teach a group of willing but amateurish volunteers how to do archaeology.
That's why I bring it up, because on one of them, they went to this town and they literally brought the whole town in, or anybody that wanted to, and then those people went home to their backyards and they told them exactly what they wanted them to do, and they went and they dug for artifacts, and then they brought them to a main center, and they analyzed the artifacts. So typically nobody gets a chance to dig in their backyard for artifacts and then have somebody actually say what it is, and that's what they so that's what they did. They were enabling an entire community. So it could be just a handful of I if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. But
Yeah, I've never heard of anything, but that doesn't mean there isn't something out there.
yeah,
You
I
know?
wonder. I'll have to Google it and see if there's a
Can anybody read that? I can't. I am sorry, I need to go. Okay, Beth, you need to go. It's like, I'm not good at
that's what it
reading.
said. That's what it
Yeah.
said. Good night, everyone. I need
Good
to.
night, Beth. We're almost done anyway. I don't know. I'll poke around and see if there, have you ever done any searching to see if there's anything like?
I haven't yet,
Yeah.
but it just, when you mentioned that and you said bottles and whatnot, I would be one of those people who would try to kick around the ground and see if I couldn't find the old
Yeah.
bottles and stuff like that. But you're
Yeah.
right. It's not the right thing to do, but
No,
it's the right thing to do if you have a professional telling you how to do it.
right. And if you're then, and for example, when I was, I found a couple things when I was poking around, and I let Sarah Sato, who's the educational, environmental education, but educational, she does other stuff. No, and so one of the items I showed her and she took back, documented where it was found. It's just an electrical insulator, but it's and it's slightly broken, but it's this wonderful shade of blue, and it's just a sort of object that comes from the properties. It lets you know one thing: they did have electricity in there at some point.
Okay.
And then in another case, I found an old pump part that is cast iron and rather attractive. It's for above ground. It's not below ground. And so we kind of have to, I think she's going to take that one. I hope she's going to take that one in, because it's an interesting piece of old metal, and it tells a little bit about the modernization of the local pumps, and it's something that she could always use in a talk or have on display,
Yep.
And it's big. It's, like that long. And it's definitely a pump part, but I'm not sure what it did. And but it's attractive. It looks like it could be a hitching post almost, the way it's designed. I don't have a lot on talks and trainings. Everybody, Oxford does regular talks, and they're now doing the talks over at where was it? It was at the retirement community.
Where?
In Oxford.
Where village?
Yeah, yeah. And there's the sort of an auditorium like in the pavilion there, and it was, as a result, the most crowded talk I've been to, because it looked like they had a good community turnout as well as the usual
What was the
suspects.
document?
That was Mason Dixon,
Oh,
um, which was an interesting talk, but occasionally flawed, unfortunately. But otherwise, the New London will be starting up its talks on the second Thursday in March, and it will probably be the Cape May talk. They may be trying that one again. That seems to be the bad luck talk right now, that they've had to cancel it twice for different reasons. But I'll know more about that toward the end of the month, because I'll be meeting with New London and we'll be talking about that. Anybody else have any talk information?
So Paul, I went, I guess it was last Thursday, to the West Grove Library and saw Bruce Maude talk about his book. What is it? Something about the crosshairs, about the two police officers that were killed in Kennett Square.
Oh yeah,
by
right,
the Johnston gang. And that's part of a series that the West Grove Library is doing with a new museum there in West Grove. I think their next one is the 22nd, and they're talking about Mrs.
Fox
Haddam. I can't remember
Yeah.
her name,
Yeah, I forget her name too, the fox hunter.
but it's on the library's website, so it's pretty easy to find.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Are they doing that with Scott Steele's museum, or are they doing it with
Yes.
Sonoma?
Yes.
Yeah. That's something we've talked about maybe doing, is getting Scott Steele and
David Porter.
David Porter, thank you, in to do a joint talk about running little historical museums, because there are really a number of them around here. Some smaller than others, and because Oxford has a sizable archives associated with their historical association, which really is probably one of the more successful historical associations in the county. And the county has a lot of historical commissions and associations. And there are a number of other ones there's a heritage center in Kennett, which a lot of us have been to, which was really a nice little museum on Kennett history. I'm not trying to get everybody in to talk about it, but it's just nice to know what these are. And I figured that we could structure that talk at having two people come in and talk about their museums, maybe for a half hour or so. And I could write a little introduction where I talked about all the things you could do locally.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So I don't know that will happen now or in the fall, because I'd also like to get Emily Kilby and her sister in to talk about their experience of visiting the Mason-Dixon markers. She and her sister decided they would visit every Mason-Dixon marker on the borders of Cecil County. Sorry, she's a Cecil County resident. And so they did a presentation down in Maryland off Appleton Road. There's a farm museum down there.
oh yeah, Cecil County Farm Museum.
Right. And so I missed that, but I thought she's a good talker. I've heard her talk before on Forgotten Fair Hill. And so she has a lot of energy and talks reasonably well. And so I suspect that those three talks will be coming down the road in New London at some point. But thanks for the information about West Grove, because if nothing else, it's good to attend talks elsewhere to see if they have any speakers there's not a lot of overlap. People don't get around. And so it's a great idea to poach other people's speakers.
Mm.
And
If you need to justify it, but okay.
yeah, no, it gives them better exposure.
Just kidding.
I'm not at all concerned about it. Jay Custer, who's a University of Delaware professor, is going to be talking at the annual meeting of the Friends of White Clay Creek State Park in Delaware. I think the meeting is at Deerfield. I think the meeting is on the 26th. I know it was a meeting where I had a conflict, the 26th of March. And he's going to be talking about the various indigenous peoples that lived in the White Clay Creek Valley. And it should be a good talk. So if you have the opportunity to go see it, I recommend it. I would be there, but I can't make it. I will see if I can find more details about that. I actually have an email that I can forward to everybody in case you are interested. I think it would be well worth going. And, you know, I hope to get started again on the revisions to the historic district ordinance. But I have to work with Jeff and the solicitor and our zoning officer to do that. So it's going to take a little time, but I'm hoping we get this in place by the end of the year. And then,
You think we'll have the same zoning officer still at the end of the year? Just kidding.
oh, you know, you actually, I would,
I think we've got a group that's going to be around for a while.
well, I hope we do.
I
It's
do
good to
too.
have some history.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you know, it's a question of price and competence. And if they feel like they're not getting competence for what they're spending, they're going to go looking elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, who knows? They don't usually change things slowly. I mean, the process starts and then they probably already.
And I think the reason we have new ones is because we had so many in between.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot of what
There was a lot
switched.
of flux. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so
after Jeff Vogel's, there was a lot of inconsistency.
I believe we had 3,
Yeah. So,
but that was a different group, and I believe that's why that group
right.
was shopped. Because yeah, that was a long time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying if
I'm not too worried about that right now.
okay.
So I'm just going to check over my notes here, see if I missed anything, talking off the top of my head. Oh yeah, so Beth joined us. The only thing I'm not sure about is whether Beth actually got appointed yet or not. Nobody's told me one way or the other, so I have to talk to Jeff and find out because she was supposed to be appointed, but if she didn't get her letter in, she may not have been appointed. So I have to talk to Beth and Jeff and see if everybody's on the same page.
Is that for HARB or historic?
Both.
Both.
And at least for the HARB, she'll bring some real estate background, which will be good. She's a broker. She's an agent, not a broker. And a broker is what we're really supposed to have, but it's hard to get a broker. Unless you're up in Westchester or something. So, it'll be a definite improvement that way.
Very good.
So that's it on my agenda for now. Anything else anybody would like to bring to the attention of the commission?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. For April, I'm going to probably try and have a annual report for your reading pleasure. Because we do have to submit an annual report. It's not a rush sort of thing. So if something happens and it's not ready by April or we don't meet in April, we'll pick it up in May or whenever. And if there's nothing pressing, we may not meet in March. But if we can get going on the the Churchill Cemetery, I would like to try and see if we can't meet in March and at least sit down with Crystal and discuss some of that and see what we can figure out. Okay?
Sounds good.
All righty.
Good night, all.
All right, good night. You all have a nice evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.
Good night.